The following show is a Pod Avenue production. You are cordially invited to have dinner with the King. Pull up a chair and join WWE Hall of Famer Jerry the King Lawler and Glenn Moore. Enjoy.
Jerry, we haven't been kicked off the air yet. We're back for episode 2.
How did that happen, Glenn Moore? You got to introduce yourself to everybody before we get started here, don't you? Don't you have to tell everybody who you are?
Well, it's in the intro, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's in our fabulous produced introduction. But I'm Glenn Moore, joined here by Jerry the King Lawler, and I'm sitting in front of a nice big plate of the Rude Awakening, which is a smoked sausage sandwich here at your barbecue spot.
You're going to love it. That has become my favorite. And, I'm a rib guy big time. I love dry ribs, and we have a different selection of different rubs that you can get on the cherry bomb or the pile driving pecan rub, and that's my favorite. But when the first time I ordered the Rude Awakening, the smoked sausage sandwich, it became my instant favorite. Now did you get the waffle fries, the sweet potato waffle fries with them?
Well, after last week's episode where you went into details about the waffle fries, I had them again this time, and they're pretty amazing, Jerry. I'm very, very impressed by your restaurant here, buddy.
And we want to invite everybody that's listening to this from all over the world. I don't care where you are. We want you to come by. This is in Memphis, Tennessee. Actually, Cordova, Tennessee. It's at 495 Germantown Parkway, and it's King Jerry Lawler's Memphis Barbecue Company. There's my cheap plug for the day, and now we can get on with the show.
Yeah, and I got some tweets from people saying, well, this is just a podcast to plug your restaurant. Well, what's the difference between, Jericho and JR doing ads before the podcast begins? It just so happens Jerry has his own restaurant, so we're going to plug it all the time. So no big deal.
Hence the reason we have the show emanating from here, and we eat during the show. And last time I got a few complaints, Glenn, that you were talking with your mouth full. Try not to do that, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll clean up. I'm sorry. All right. This episode, Jerry, we're going to be talking, since it's WrestleMania season, we're going to be talking about your WrestleMania match with Michael Cole, your only WrestleMania match that you have had, and just some stories from there, with Michael Cole, maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff, and some stuff that Michael Cole said about your mom who passed away around that time, and how you reacted to the whole storyline and what he said and whatnot. So we're going to go in depth about that. But before we get into that story and the whole match itself and how it became, and what your thoughts on it personally, you have been cleared to wrestle, 3 months after your heart attack back in 2012? Am I correct?
You are correct.
Okay, so you were cleared to wrestle. So you've been wrestling on the indies since then, and you I guess we talked about it last week. You were just up in New England wrestling, and so you 5 years later, you're still wrestling on the weekends. But you have not had a WWE match since your heart attack, and your first bump, for those that talk wrestling, which is you actually taking an attack and falling to the ground. Was with Dolph Ziggler in your King's Court segment a few weeks back. That was your first bump since your heart attack. But what's going on with that? I mean, you wrestle on the indies all the time, but you haven't wrestled back in the WWE. Is there something behind that, or what's the story behind that?
Well, yeah, there's a big story behind that. Actually, that's why I was kind of excited about the situation there on SmackDown Live a few weeks ago, getting to have the interaction with Dolph Ziggler, because since the heart attack, I have been on what the WWE has called a no-contact list. The no-contact list, which means basically what it says. I mean, that's because of a physical condition of one kind or the other. You have no contact whatsoever, no kind of physicality. And I've questioned over the years why I'm still on that no contact list. And of course, there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this that may not remember or didn't even realize that 4.5 years ago, I was doing the live broadcast, Monday Night Raw. We were in Montreal, Canada, and I wrestled in a match. Back at that time, 4.5 years ago, it wasn't unusual at all for me to get up from the commentary table go in and compete in a match and then come back and continue doing commentary. I did it often, and so that was the situation on that particular night. And I was in a match with Randy Orton as my partner, and we wrestled Dolph Ziggler and CM Punk. And I had a little rivalry going at that time with CM Punk, and we wound up having had a cage match and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of how that led up to that match. So I'm sitting at the announce table with Michael Cole, get up during a commercial break, go in the ring. I have my tights on, boots on, and everything. And Randy Orton and I wrestled Dolph Ziggler and CM Punk. We went about, 8-10 minute match. We won the match. Randy Orton and I won the match. Everything was fine. I come back over. They go to commercial break. I come back over. I sit down at the announce table, and the next match comes out. And I remember it was Kane and Daniel Bryan, I believe. And we were, Michael Cole and I are doing the commentary on the match. And I felt perfectly fine. I had no warnings or any pain or chest pains or anything. I'm just looking up at Kane and Daniel Bryan in the ring, and it was as if I blinked my eyes, and when I opened my eyes again, my girlfriend Lauren is standing there at my bedside. I've got a ventilator down my throat. I'm in the intensive care unit in the hospital in Montreal, and I had suffered a cardiac arrest. In which, for one reason or other, your heart just stops beating instantly. It's not quite the same as a heart attack where you have clogged arteries and, you're all of a sudden that causes chest pain because the oxygen is getting cut off or the blood supply is getting cut off to parts of your heart. And, that's your typical heart attack. This was a cardiac arrest when, for whatever reason, suddenly your heart just stops beating. And just fortunately, there was Doc Sampson, who was our ringside doctor at the time in the WWE, was basically sitting right next to me. And when I slumped over at the announce table and then eventually fell onto the floor, of course, everybody realized something was wrong at the time. And he immediately started doing CPR. He felt that I had no pulse. Immediately started doing CPR. They got me to the back, and there were two other Canadian paramedics there, and they all took turns doing the CPR because my heart stopped and didn't beat again for 22 minutes. So basically, for 22 minutes, I was, clinically or technically dead. And it wasn't until that length of time that they got the paddles and shocked me. Wound up having I think they shocked me 7 times before my heart started beating again. But then it was amazing. Once they got the heartbeat back and the heart rhythm back on track, I've been fine. As I said, when I came to in the hospital, I didn't feel as if anything had ever happened. And since that time, I've not had 1 minute's problem. I've not had any more episodes or anything. It was just one of those weird things that you can't explain. And the amazing thing about a cardiac arrest is only 7 out of 1,000 people that have them survive. Because if you're not somewhere, and usually those 7 people that have a cardiac arrest are in a hospital when it happens, and they have immediate medical, attention to be able to get the paddles and to get the heartbeat started again. Then just fortunately, I was right there with the next to the doctor who did the CPR on me. That's what basically kept me alive until they got my heart started again. So. That was like I said, 4.5 years ago. But then when I came back to Memphis and my cardiologist here in Memphis, Dr. McDonald, after checking me over and looking at everything, and he said, you're just so lucky in the fact that, if something like that had to happen to you, you had the best possible outcome. He said, there's no damage to to any part of your heart, which typically happens in a heart attack when your heart loses the blood flow to certain parts of it. It basically dies and forms scar tissue on your heart. Didn't have any of that. I didn't have any damage. And so it was like, basically as if, I'm not going to say this as if it never happened, but I was fortunate enough that I got like 3 months afterwards from my cardiologist, pretty much a clean bill of health. And one of the things that you're required to do is once you have an episode like that, they want you to do regular exercise and raise your heart rate any opportunity you get to do that. That's what exercising is all about. Get your heart pumping good. And so wrestling is always a part of that. And he said, there's no reason that you can't back and continue wrestling just the way you've always done. So, I started back on the independent circuit, and I've looked back, and I've had over 130 matches on the independent circuit, around the Tennessee territory, up in the Northeast, basically all over the country, over 130 matches in that 4.5-year period since the heart attack or the cardiac arrest. But the WWE has never given me the okay to wrestle again in the WWE. And we've talked. One time Lauren confronted the doctor, the doctor, and told him, she said, Jerry wrestles on a regular basis, and why is he not cleared to wrestle in the WWE? And he just basically told her, he said, I think that they look at Jerry as a liability, and by liability in that they mean it's a public relations liability. In other words, they're under the gun in terms of, if something else were to happen to me, the public would look at them and say, oh my gosh, here's a guy who has a history of a heart problem, and then you guys put him back in the ring and they would look at it as, you guys made him go back in the ring and wrestle, not that he wanted to, which is the case, and then here's something else happens to him. So I'm sure that's been the reason, because I've never even been looked at by the WWE doctors, other than having a regular EKG from them that has always been perfectly fine. So that's been the situation with the WWE. And I've never gone in and sat down with Vince and say, hey, come on, let me have more matches. But hey, I mean, they got plenty of new young talent, and a lot of times anyway, when you want to go out there and they put you in matches, you'll get on social media people saying, oh, why are they taking up time with guys that are old or past their prime and that sort of thing, and when they got all this new young talent out there that they need to give exposure to. And so I have no problem with that. But anyway, we were talking about the fact that I would like to have one other final match that would maybe make up for the Michael Cole fiasco that I had at WrestleMania. But yeah, a lot of people look at that match, and I've had people say, "Oh, the worst match in WrestleMania history." Hey, you know what? I've watched it, and it wasn't that bad. It was, it was as good as it could be, considering you had one of the participants. One half of the match was a 130-pound or 140-pound announcer who had never been in a wrestling ring before in his life. So I thought in that case we did pretty darn good. And Stone Cold Steve Austin was a special referee, and we had all sorts of Jack Swagger involved in the match, and I thought it told a good story, and I was happy with the match.
When people say, "Oh, Lawler had a quote unquote comedy match with Cole," I mean, I don't want to say you regret it, but you would like to have that one more match, that WrestleMania that moment to where, okay, this kind of not defines your career because you've done plenty in your career, but hey, this could overtake this WrestleMania match, and I can have a legit match at WrestleMania that can be my quote unquote WrestleMania moment, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I mean, and certainly with the history of Dolph Ziggler and I now, with there could be something done in that respect, and it would be a natural. And the thing with the match with Michael Cole and I was a natural in the fact that it came about as part of the storyline, so to speak, came about as part of bringing in something real and personal, and it created a lot of emotion and a lot of anticipation for that match. And the fact that Michael talked about, well, even before that, leading up to it, one of the great things, I think it was on my 60th birthday, they gave me a title match against The Miz on television that it was such a good match that I think a lot of people really thought, and it was like one of the only championship matches that I've had in my career in the WWE. That's one of the things that if you want to call it regrets of your career, I've won more titles probably, or more title matches than anybody in the history of wrestling. You look it up in Wikipedia, and I've won 168 title matches in my career, but never won a title in the WWE. And so that match that I had against The Miz when he was the WWE champion was such a good match. I just knocked him. It was a ladder match for the championship. The championship was hanging high above the middle of the ring, and The Miz had climbed to the top rope and was fixing to jump off on me, and I came up, knocked Miz off the top rope. He fell all the way down through a table onto the floor, and he was history. All I had to do was then go and climb that ladder and grab the championship. And I got down. I was almost to the top of the ladder. The championship was in my hand. Miz was still laying down on the floor through the table, and I had the championship in my grasp. And all of a sudden, here comes Michael Cole up from the announce table, and he grabs my leg and keeps me from grabbing the title. And so that started that was almost like a real life situation, in the fact that a lot of the fans were saying, here's the King, never had a title shot. Here he is going to become the champion, for even if it is for a short time, whatever. If he just had a great match with The Miz, and it was just something that just looked like it needed to happen. And then Michael Cole screwed it up. So there was just that storyline that was, very, very something to get, very easily to get invested in emotionally. And then after that, Michael went on TV and said some things that, and I've had a lot of people question me about this, over the years. Man, were you really upset with Michael Cole over the things that he said? And quite frankly, I was asked about it beforehand, and it was all okay with me, but because he never said anything disparaging, but he talked about the fact that my mom had passed away recently. And, he just said things like, well, you know what, King, your mom's going to have the best seat in the house. She's going to be up there in heaven looking down at her son getting beat by me right in the middle of a WrestleMania ring. And, it was one of those situations where the people could relate to it, and they know how they would feel if somebody even mentioned, the passing of your mother to you. And that's the way that was. So it really put a lot of heat on Michael Cole. And at the time, the people really wanted to see. I mean, then he came up with that silly coal mine thing where he had the plexiglass built around him to keep people away from him while he was doing the commentary and that sort of thing. So it was a very easy thing for the people to get behind, and it was real easy at the time to dislike Michael Cole. And so then when the match was made for Cole and I at WrestleMania, then of course to add Stone Cold Steve Austin as a special referee, oh my God, it just made, to me, it made the match huge. So I don't have any regrets about it. It was a fun match. It was a great build up to the match. The match itself left a little to be desired, and the fact that Michael just had never done something like that before. That would be like I don't even know what to equate it to. That would be like just throwing you out to drive a NASCAR race in the Daytona 500. Sure, you've watched it and you've seen it done a lot of times and you've enjoyed it and you've talked about it, but all of a sudden they throw you behind the wheel of one of those race cars and say, hey, try to win that race. And that was the situation with Michael Cole. Never been in a ring before, and all of a sudden they say, hey, get in the ring. Not just get in the ring in a match, get in the ring at WrestleMania.
Did you have to do you have to calm him down or anything? But even before the match, that he's always behind the mic, but going into the ring, like you said, this is one of his first times, especially on a big stage like WrestleMania in front of 80,000 people. Before you guys walk through the curtain, did you have to reassure him, like, okay, you're going to be okay, I'm going to take care of it, like it happens before a match, or did any of those conversations happen?
No, I think the only thing that I can remember was I think that oh gosh, I knew I figured I was going to give him a drop kick or something, and I think that I practiced it one time to show him what a drop kick was going to be like, and I kicked him in the mouth and chipped his tooth. And so it was one of those situations where I wish it would have been better off had I not done it, Had I not, and then from that point on, I thought he's going to be more nervous and worse if we try to prepare him rather than just let him go out there and let it just happen naturally. Just had it let happen. Let the people see what was really happening. A guy in a WrestleMania ring for the first time in his life, and a guy in a wrestling match for the first time in his life. And so that's what happened. The only thing I wish we would have had, I wish we would have had a little more involvement from Stone Cold Steve Austin and Jack Swagger. I think that could have helped the match a little bit because there were parts, and then the match really it went too long. There were parts where for Michael to try to hold up his end, and he confessed afterwards. He said, "Man, our term in wrestling, when you get tired, so tired that you can barely move in a match, it's called you're blown up." And Michael said, "Oh my God, I blew up in the first minute of the match." And when you do that, your performance is not what it should be because you have no energy. You've lost all your strength, so to speak. And he was just completely winded after the first minute of the match. But when I look back, I thought he did a great job for under the conditions for being in there the first time ever in the WrestleMania match. And once again, like I said, and of course that's me being pretty biased, but I didn't think it was the worst match in WrestleMania history by any means.
So would you? I mean, if you had a chance to get back in the ring, moment so to speak, a match to kind of say goodbye to your career, but to kind of have that WrestleMania match, do you think ideally you and Ziggler, kind of you taking revenge on what Ziggler said to you at the King's Court and a whole heart attack situation? Do you think Ziggler would probably be the person?
Well, I think that would be something that would be a natural, and the fact that it's playing off something very personal. I mean, here's a guy who, and he took credit before. He took credit for it because in the past I made comments almost blaming him for it. Here's a guy who caused me to have a cardiac arrest and die. And had I not, I wouldn't even be here today if it wasn't for the medical help that I got. But, I mean, Dolph Ziggler jumped as high as he could in the air and came down as hard as he could 10 times, 10 elbow drops across my chest, so much so that even JBL now refers to it as the heart stopper. And my cardiologist told me that the impact of those blows, 10 of those blows, could have easily knocked my heart off rhythm. And the blows knocked my heart off rhythm, and it took like 10 minutes for it to just continue to more and more and more off them until finally it just locked up. It just seized up, and that was the cardiac arrest. And he's not for sure that's what caused it because they don't really ever know what causes a cardiac arrest, but he said that's a possibility. So, I've said that in the past. And another thing, I swear to God that one of the last things I remember about that match was I'm laying there and Dolph Ziggler had dropped like the fifth elbow on my chest, and I distinctly remember thinking to myself, damn, whatever happened to the days that we used to do this and not kill each other? I mean, because it was like he was, I was going to have a pirate's dream after that match. I was going to have a sunken chest, I thought. It was like he was coming down so freaking hard that I've never experienced anything like it. And so sure enough, if then he comes out and takes credit for causing a cardiac arrest, and then also says he's not sorry about it, doesn't apologize for it, and wants to do it again and finish the job that he started. My gosh, I think that's something that people could relate to in a minute, and I certainly could, and I think that would be a natural storyline for a good return match.
But bottom line, as we wrap up this second episode, bottom line, Jerry, do you think you'll have opportunity to have an actual match in WWE, or do you think that ship has sailed as far as a PR and, a risk, a liability? Do you think you're ever able to, have that kind of send-off match?
Honestly,
ever?
I think that Vince McMahon thinks enough of me that if I were to go in and have a sit-down meeting with him and explain all of this to him and literally ask for that match, I think that Vince and I have a good enough relationship that he would say yes. But in reality, will I do that? Will I ask for that meeting to go in and put Vince on the spot like that? No, I will not. And without me doing that, in your words, I think that ship has sailed. I doubt I'll ever have another match in the WWE. And simply because I don't want to put Vince in that position of, him taking on the responsibility and the liability of saying, oh gosh, I like King and I'm doing this because of our friendship over the years. But Lord, what if something happens to him in there? How will that make the company look? No, I'm not gonna put him on the spot like that, and I'm not gonna ask for that type of favor. So probably I'll just be content with doing my matches. Here in the independent circuit, we've got some matches coming up. It's about to be spring and summer here in Memphis, and down on Beale Street they have a place called Handy Park. And we're looking at doing a monthly event down there to help draw people down to Beale Street. Big wrestling event every month down at Handy Park on Beale, and put people on Beale Street and into the club. So, I can stay as busy as I want. I could literally wrestle 2 to 4 times every single weekend. I get asked that often to be booked. But as far as WWE goes, like you say, I think that ship has sailed.
All right, let's go to the dessert portion of the show. What dessert do you have?
First of all, what did you think of the Rude Awakening?
I loved it. I'm ready for dessert, King.
I thought you were going to order a second one there, Glenn.
Sometimes I will.
Okay, dessert, man. We got I don't know about you, but I'm having one of these big homemade chocolate brownies that have, oh my gosh, and then I know that sounds plain. I know that sounds passe, a chocolate brownie. But these are not just any chocolate brownies. That you try one, and I promise you'll come back again and again and again for them. They're awesome. You gotta grab one. That's what we're both having, the chocolate brownie. Okay.
All right, got you. All right, so the dessert portion is our Q&A, and the question I want to ask you, and this is from Mark, who is saying he's from Suplex City for some reason in the email. He wants to know about Cole, and what did you think about him being a heel announcer? He mentions that he thought that Cole was kind of over the top when it comes to being a heel announcer. But what were your thoughts on as Michael Cole as being a heel?
Well,
guy?
You know what? During that time, I thought he did a fantastic job at it. I mean, I thought he was great. And then it served its purpose for building up to our WrestleMania match. But then I think Vince after that wanted Michael to kind of pull the reins back and become once again more the right down the middle play-by-play guy, which is, of course, also very understandable. That's why you got the play-by-play guy, and that's why you got the color guys. But let's face it, JR was a play-by-play guy, but he was certainly not. He was certainly not right down the middle. He was a homer when it came to the good guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Oh my gosh, he was in his corner as more than anybody. So I don't think there's any steadfast rule that a guy can't get slanted a little one way or the other. And Michael, believe it or not, if you know Michael, he's got that personality. He's just sort of a natural heel anyway. But he's a cool guy. He's a likable guy. And I know for a fact that he sort of misses doing that heel persona because he was such a natural at it. But anyway, I don't think that the powers that be want him. I think they want him to be straight down the middle and leave the heel and the devil's advocate commentary to guys like Corey Graves and Byron Saxton and that sort of thing.
JBL.
Well, yeah, but I mean, JBL now is working with Morrow, so I was just talking about Michael Cole.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Michael Cole. I mean, still to this day, I'll get people come up to me and say, "Man, if you ever get just within arm's reach of Michael Cole, punch him in the mouth." Michael Cole got heat during that period of time, almost like Andy Kaufman got heat. It's the everlasting heat. There are some people that will never forget the things that he said and did in that little during that little rivalry that he'll have to endure forever.
It's amazing, and then like I said, people remember you for the WrestleMania match, and hopefully down the road, you have kind of like your send-off, WWE WrestleMania match, because I think you definitely deserve one. Oh, I think the check is here, King. I got to run, buddy, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Hey, Glenn. Wow, 2 in a row.
Next week on Dinner with the King.
Even you Memphians know there are only 3 guarantees in life: death, taxes, and Randy Savage.
The preceding show is a Pod Avenue production.